So, the first societal system that influenced our protagonist was definitely poverty. A quote that we have from him is, "I know how silly and paranoid that sounds, but it's a common condition of being poor white trash. You're always afraid that the good things in your life are temporary, that someone can take them away because you have no power beyond your own brute strength to stop them." Bragg's mother worked long hours for little pay in order to provide for her son. Bragg admits that as a child he did not feel less than anyone else because he was growing up poor. However, he describes dating as a teenager as girl after girl breaking things off as soon as they saw where he lived. From his teenage years into adulthood, Bragg struggles with the shame associated with coming from poverty, and guilt for not pulling his mother out of her situation sooner, and jealousy towards peers who grew up in financially stable households. This shame affected his mother as well, to the point where she refused to see her son receive his Pulitzer Prize because she was too afraid to be in a room filled with people that came from wealth. Poverty and social class have so much power on how we view ourselves. The stereotypes and stigmas surrounding those who live in poverty are a trap. The climb out of poverty is filled with overcoming the preconceived notions that one is lazier or less intelligent simply because they are poor. As a society, we have little compassion for the impoverished. We say that homeless people must be using drugs. We complain that our tax dollars are going towards welfare programs. And over again, we say that social mobility is possible if you work hard enough. The shame our culture places on the poor must feel suffocating. Bragg was able to get out, but the above quote shows that the shame, anger, and fear associated with living in poverty haunt him to this day.
Another societal system that we talked about were family ties. So Rick Bragg's father was a Korean War veteran. He was an alcoholic that left his family for periods at a time. As Rick was growing up, he did not have much of a relationship with his dad. He witnessed his father beat his mother multiple times, and his brother tried to stop it, which then resulted in his brother being harmed. Because his father left their family, they had barely any money. Finally, after time, Rick's father wanted to see his family again. Soon after that, his father died from tuberculosis. His mother had to work 2 jobs in order to support their family. She was a very selfless person by spending all of her money on her kids only. She would make sure to provide for them first before anything. She also did not eat much because she would make sure that they had food on their plate. When Rick's father passed away, she continued to support her family. Rick always felt like his mother was never proud of him. All he wanted was to make her proud and pay her back for all she did for him and his brothers. Sam was his older brother. Rick always looked up to Sam when growing up. He was the one that tried to protect the family from their abusive father. His younger brother Mark became more like his father. He suffered from alcohol addiction. Rick says that Mark did not have a good role model to look up to like Rick did with their oldest brother Sam.
For me, in terms of how I did relate to the text, as a young child, I spent summers at my grandparents' house in a small town about an hour east of Atlanta called Covington, Georgia. My grandparents had spent their whole lives in that town, and so had all of their neighbors. It was there that I learned how to be ladylike and also how to shoot a rifle. It was there I learned the words to Amazing Grace, but after church service was over on Sunday, my grandfather let me do donuts in his pickup truck in an empty cow pasture. I related deeply to a lot of the Southern culture that Bragg emphasized throughout the novel. In many ways, the values held by his family were also held by mine. In his idealistic description of Southerners as a whole, he painted a picture that I believe accurately reflects the people who were born and raised in the small towns in the South. I hope that spending the summers of my childhood in this small town allows me to draw on my experience to connect with my students who may not be growing up in suburbia as I did. The community in a small town is something I believe to be immensely powerful, and I intend on creating a classroom community that is reflective of that. A classroom where I know my students and my students know each other. I want to bottle up the sincerity and genuine concern found in these relationships and bring it into my classroom. There were other levels, on some other levels, though I did not relate to Bragg's story. The struggles endured by the Bragg family in this novel were heartbreaking and relentless. The concept of needing food, clothes, or job security is something that I've been fortunate enough not to have ever experienced. My father was gone a lot while I was growing up, but because he was away on business and working hard to support our family. And while my teenage angst may have caused a few fights with him, they were never serious. I've never experienced hunger in my life, and resources for my family have never been scarce. If they ever were, my parents didn't let us, like the kids, find out. I grew up in a safe suburban bubble with a tight-knit family, but many of my students will not be from such a wonderful home life. Parent-teacher conferences will be an ideal time to peek carefully into the lives of my students. Their parents' clothes, their attitude, their questions, and whether or not they even show up to parent-teacher conferences will speak volumes of my students' home life. Knowing my students' backgrounds is the first step in building a genuine relationship with them, and for middle schoolers, their family is central to who they are and how they view the world. I've never gone hungry, but I have students that will. I've never gone to school not knowing where my parents were or when they will get home, but some of my students will. I can plan for specific struggles that some of my kids will face. I can bring granola bars for hungry students. I can be a consistent adult in their life that they know that they can count on. But one thing that is central to me being the best teacher that I can be is not allowing myself to get so caught up in my own life that I forget about these students.
Rick Bragg grew up in the South. Family meant a lot to him. He loved his mother, and his mother did everything she could for her family. As he grew up, he wanted to make her proud in a way to pay her back for everything she did for him. He promised his mother that he would buy her a house one day and provide for her in a way that her husband chose not to. He eventually was able to buy her a house that was a safe place for her. This shows how family means everything to him. He values the people who have been there and supported him all his life. I connect with this because family means everything to me also. He believed in attending college and becoming successful. He never gave up, which is something I value. Life gets hard sometimes, but he never gave up on his dreams. The things that Rick had to go through are very depressing. I'm fortunate enough not to have gone through them. His father had an alcohol addiction, which caused him to leave his family. He lived in poverty his whole childhood because of his father. His mother was not able to fully support them. They had lack of resources such as food. His mother would starve so that her sons could eat. I have been fortunate enough to not have to experience this in my life. I've been raised by both of my parents who have done everything to support me. Even though I may not have been through this, I know I will have students each year like Rick and his brothers. There will be students who come to school starving or come wearing the same outfits each week because they don't have enough money. This book has taught me how hard life can get at times. As a teacher, I may not notice these things, but I want to be a role model in these kids' lives. I want people like Rick to be excited to come to school because it's a safe place for them and a place to get away from the chaos at home.